youth inclusion, advisor. Thank you so much for staying with us. On Saturday, there was a celebration, an international celebration on Youth Day. And we know some of these international celebrations are to just, one, bring awareness into why this day is important, and to give opportunities for the affected people or the group to again air their grievances. Did we see that as part of the national government is concerned, where there was a national celebration by the government and issues that are affecting young people being addressed on Saturday? Maybe I can begin with you, Anthony.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for national government, but I'll speak for parliament, because I'm proud of what we did.
But was there a national celebration?
Ideally, it's supposed to be there, but we were not involved.
Okay.
But I'll speak on what we did. Because you see, the theme was green skills towards sustainability.
Right.
And that's a very, very fundamental theme.
Yeah.
Because, you know, young people are supposed to be the architects driving the climate action conversation.
Right.
But even if you look at the global action call, many of them have been missing out. It's just the other day that most of us are coming out to voice our presence in this conversation. In Parliament on 7th, which was the beginning of the week-long event, we hosted young people from every county in Kenya sitting as parliamentarians for the day. They elected their own speaker, they elected their own committees, and they were able to engage meaningfully in the day, debating, you know, fundamental issues touching on green skills, because we realized their space is very important. And they were able to adopt key recommendations that were then tabled on the floor of Parliament on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
On Tuesday at the Senate chamber by Senator Esi Okenyuri, on Wednesday at the National Assembly chamber by none other than our chair, Honorable Gitonga Mukunji.
Yeah.
And beyond that, we also got the attention of the House, because the Speaker of the National Assembly did a communication to the effect recognizing the importance of that week and the theme thereof, and also recognized the important discussions that the young people had throughout the entire week. And those discussions now are part and parcel of the documents informing policies within Parliament. I think that is what we were looking for within the International Youth Week.
All right. And Philip, how was your International Youth Day on Saturday and week?
It was a busy week. Planning for Saturday especially, because that's when we were marking the International Youth Day. We had partners. We had Leap Africa fly all the way from Lagos, Nigeria, to join our collaboration and partnership for the day, and of course towards the end of the month. Now what we did is we had a youth rally, and we are calling it the Youth Day of Service. Actually, if you see my pin, then it's not an ordinary SDG pin. It has in an embedment of YDSO, which is the Youth Day of Service. Now, from Ngong Rescos, we had a procession, a walk sensitizing the community on the SDGs, especially those that make meaning to young people, such as SDG 8 on economic growth and decent work. We centered our communication around SDG 4, which is education and skilling young people. We talked about SDG 15, 14, and 13, climate action, water, life on land, and all that. Now, we got to Ngong Road Forest, which was our epicenter of action, planted trees, indigenous trees in Lenana block, which was allocated by KFS as a partner, and finally wrapped up the day with speeches and communication from stakeholders. And our chief guest even for the day was a young member of County Assembly in Nairobi. Her name is Nasra Nanda. Gave a very nice address to young people. Same things that we're talking about here, that if you don't do it, nobody's going to do it on our behalf. As young people, if we are not accountable for our time, if we are not accountable for what we want to do, if we don't plan ahead of the usual suspects who we expect to support the space, then nobody does it. For example, my question is, if 4BM and Leap Africa have done this in Nairobi and had presence on media, had participation everywhere. We have activities in Kwale, we have activities in Kisumu, We're going to have activities in Rwanda and in Kampala, and actually the team is now in Zambia. Where was the president who talks about the hustlers and the engagement of young people? Where was the deputy president who goes to a graduation ceremony and discourages young people and tells them that there is no employment? Where was the prime cabinet secretary who has been allocated a huge office and is supposed to go into our constitution? Where were our political leaders? Where was the national celebration, and who captured that? I didn't see anything on TV covering the International Youth Day celebration in Kenya. So that's why we keep on saying. Does that tell
of the importance given to the young people in Kenya?
That's a perfect reflection and corroboration of what we keep on talking about.
Right.
That young people do not make meaning, do not make sense to government and people sitting in positions of power. And so long as we have that contempt continuing, so long as we have that attitude of, pushing the youth to the periphery and not listening to their voices completely, we will have even a bigger crisis than COVID, a bigger crisis than climate change, a bigger crisis than poverty.
Yeah.
And that would be the insurgence of all these institutions, all these communities, so that we have young people having to do what they have to do on their own behalf.
Yeah, and Anthony, when you look at the theme this year, green skills for the young people, so what are some of the opportunities? Because even Philip says if we don't do it, then no one will. So let's talk about the opportunities that the green space is presenting for young people in Kenya and also in other African countries.
I think, as I correctly put it, it's clear that the young people are the architects of the climate change conversation. And the green skills basically presents governments an opportunity to mainstream the agenda of climate action into even the education system.
Right.
You're looking at, for example, introducing sustainable agriculture as a key component. When you're talking about green skills, how are we developing the next generation of farmers to be climate sensitive in their agricultural practices? You're looking at exposing young people to trainings on things like renewable energy, and positioning them strategically as drivers in that space.
Right.
You're looking at environment conservation measures. I like the recently launched Green Army kind of an arrangement by government, because that's including young people into and building their green skills.
Right.
So green skills basically wants to tap on the energy of young people. You're looking at them driving the technological aspects of climate related conversation. So all these put together now make sense of the green skills.
Right.
And I think the theme was geared towards allowing this conversation to trickle down across structures of government, across spaces of leadership. And that's why in Parliament, we thought Parliament is a safe space for young people. Parliament legislates. So we wanted them to come document their conversations so that we now convert these conversations into potential bills that we can then drive through Parliament. As we speak, we are already looking at the critical reports that came out from the conversations of young people, because they looked at this comprehensively. They looked at it across agriculture. They looked at it at what opportunities in terms of employment are being brought about by the green skills. So, and how do we as parliamentarians convert this thinking to a law that can compel government to now enact policies that allow young people to benefit? Because many young people are in technology today. We are talking about content creators. How do we tap on the strength of such people so that we don't just have people, producing content that is unnecessary, but they can actually produce content that adds value to the economic life. For example, if you can do content around green economy and attract support from people within that space, that's also making a livelihood out of it.
Yeah.
So we want to convert that conversation into a matter that translates into improving the livelihoods of young people, into reducing the rate of unemployment in Kenya, and that's what the whole new concept of green skills is all about.
Right.
Again, even in our education system, we must be able, as they look at revising the curriculum, some of these skills must be inculcated from, the kindergarten level.
Right.
You grow knowing that it feels good to actually take care of the environment, and you can actually make a living out of that. So we want to incentivize sustainable environmental conservation, so that as we grow up, because the people who will be driving this conversation in the coming years are young people.
Yeah.
And in fact, in most of my submissions, I've always protested, saying that when you leave out this critical demographic, how sustainable are the measures being put in place today?
Yeah.
So I like the model Kenya has taken, especially on the Green Army. It's a very positive one.
Yeah.
So the next step is now mainstreaming the green skills across all our sectors, so that the training becomes part of our lifestyle. It becomes part of the new culture within the Kenyan space.
Right. Philip, if we don't do it, no one will. You said that. So practically, what should the young people do to ensure that they tap into these opportunities that Anthony is talking about? There's also the question of the inclusion that we've talked about for the better part of this conversation. What is the role of the government as well in supporting young people?
Firstly, the buck stops with the government. You cannot run a territory, run an economy, and sit at the realm of power and authority without taking care of your demographics, and especially the most important demographics in the youth, which is the dominant population. The youth is a critical mass that is needed for many things. Actually, we are the doers of anything to be done. If from tech, from supporting SMEs, from the workforce, all the way to campaign machineries and actualizing government initiatives. You can't build houses in this country without the energy and the effort of young people.
Yeah.
You can't run even public sector. There are those who sit in the front line and occupy positions of decision making and policy, but the actual doers at the end of the day are the young people. So what we must do as young people is keep organizing ourselves in those small groupings, in those CBOs, in those border bases, in those youth groups, in those county networks, and morph up this so that it's a snowballing to the national level and national conversation. I believe and I have faith that in the next election, we should not even talking about who is going to be our presidential candidate, either side of the divide. I'm looking forward to a day when as young people, we can congregate around one of our own and elect a president of our own, elect a deputy president of our own, so that we don't blame any other person. But so long as you take handouts and incentives from those who buy your loyalty and buy you for mayhem and conflict, then we lose the picture.
Yeah.
What the government must do is be accountable. We must be accountable to all our inclusivity and inclusion laws. We have primary and secondary legislation talking about youth inclusion at all aspects, in employment, in sports, in education and skilling, in political party participation and all that.
Yeah.
Let us be accountable to those laws. The same way we talk about gender inclusion and the threshold of inclusivity, it must be the same case for the youth. And something monumental has happened at the global stage, Purity, if you allow me in 1 minute. Last year, the UN General Assembly agreed to create what we are calling the Youth Office. Now, the Youth Office would be one of the major agencies of the UN. We've talked about the UNDP, we've talked about UN Women and such like. So we are moving from what we've had, the decade long of envoys, youth envoys working on behalf of the youth to represent the youth voices at UN. But now we are going to have at the secretariat level, the youth office. Now what this youth office does is to engage in a more decisive role, in a more decisive position, because you are going to have a Deputy Secretary General that is youth and representing the voices of the youth for the first time.
All right.
That has to be done at the national level as well.
We have to wrap it up. Anthony Buluma, you had a parting shot. We have to wrap it up. Time is not on our side.
I think
in 10 seconds.
In 10 seconds, I will just say that despite the challenges, there is still hope.
All right.
And hope must be the currency that we trade on as young people out here, let's not lose sight of the many opportunities that are before us. I know where there are challenges, there are opportunities. We must not allow ourselves to wallow in miasma of hopelessness. We must strive and push ourselves beyond the limit, because this country belongs to us, not the political class.
Thank you so much, Anthony Buluma, who is the CEO at the Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association, and Philip Thande is the Young People's Inclusion Advisor. Many thanks for being part of this conversation this morning, and that brings us to the end of News Center this morning. But just before we wrap it up, here are some of the top stories that we are following up for you. And the second round of talks between